Welcome back. Why did African-American voter turnout drop in 2016? Let's start by looking at the numbers. November's election set a record with more than 137 million Americans casting a ballot for president. However, according to Pew Research, the percentage of black voters participating nationwide dropped more than 66% in 2012 to 59%. It was a similar situation in Florida. Our State Division of Elections shows black turnout went from 72% to 69%. So what's behind this dramatic shift? Joining us for more is Rodney Jones, president of the Manatee County NAACP, Cornell Maxfield, president of the Manatee Sarasota Democratic Black Caucus, and Jack Riley, an assistant professor of political science at New College of Florida. Welcome to all of you. Jack, I want to start with you. In terms of the numbers you see here, what difference did this make in the eventual outcome?
I mean, I think that when we talk about the eventual outcome of this past election, we're talking about just 3 or 4 states where the election was determined by a very small number of votes on the grand scale thing. So everything mattered. Right.
So, I mean, was this determinative in places like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin?
I mean, it could have been. That's a hard counterfactual to go for, because other things could have been determinative too. It certainly didn't help.
Right. Rodney, when you first heard about the numbers from Pew Research, what went through your mind?
I wasn't surprised. I think black community was somewhat disenchanted with both candidates. And then there's still a great feeling of being disenfranchised from the system, because regardless of, many feel that regardless of what regime has been in, whether it's been a Republican regime or Democratic Party has had some control, that black people have still been, we still suffer. We haven't found our way here in America, and many feel that, you know, voting, especially out of our younger population, black community, they just don't see the value in their vote.
I want to take this into the 2 different areas that you just mentioned. Number one, when you and I talked about this issue previously, you said that this is really being felt when it comes to millennial voters, that unlike their parents, and I believe, Jack, you told me that 90% of African Americans usually vote Democratic, that millennials have less identification with the Democratic Party or either political party.
Yeah, that's true. I believe that's true. Also, you know, I feel too that the Democratic Party somewhat took the black vote for granted. I'm not afraid to say that, and they should not have. They automatically assume that if you're black, you're going to vote Democrat, and a lot of people just didn't turn out to the polls for the presidential election.
Well, Cornell, up to now, you've been the president of the Manatee and Sarasota Black Caucus. When somebody like Rodney says that, and you've worked, I know how hard you worked in the last election. I mean, I would imagine that hurts.
Yeah. Well, like Rodney, I was not surprised by those percentages, because I hear often that the black vote is down, and you know, I understand that there are many, many reasons why a black vote might be down at different points in our history. But right now, I really, really think that what's happening transcends the black vote and transcends race, and that there is something else happening in our country, and that Americans are, the American vote is really what is at issue right now.
Well, let me ask the question from this perspective, since our area went pretty substantially for Donald Trump, and the president, when he was a candidate, went into inner city Detroit and said, why not give me a shot? What do you have to lose? Is it possible that the people who live in our community heard that, and that's in fact what they did? Cornell?
I believe that that did resonate with some folks. I believe that it did. I believe that it resonated with the people who have been feeling disenfranchised and had been feeling taken advantage of and taken for granted by the Democratic Party. And we know that that's the case.
Jack, I want to get to one other area before we go to the break. As Dwayne reported in his story, at the same time, Hispanic and Asian voting was up. What's the difference there?
I think the biggest difference is who we just had as president in many cases. We didn't have a Hispanic president, we had an African-American president. And I think that was probably a significant factor, although a lot of this is just float within what you'd expect.
So if we had next time a Hispanic nominee from either party, do you think that the Hispanic community would come out in even a higher percentage because it would be a first of its kind nomination?
That's quite possible. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that when people see someone on the ballot they identify with in some fashion, they're more likely to turn out to vote for that person.
All right. We're just getting started with our conversation, and we will pick it up right after we check on the weather. Stay with us. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are discussing African-American turnout in the 2016 presidential election and what factors affect the way minority groups vote. Our guests tonight are Rodney Jones, president of the Manatee County NAACP, Cornell Maxfield, president of the Manatee-Sarasota Democratic Black Caucus, and Jack Riley, an assistant professor of political science at New College of Florida. Rodney, I guess the impression I get from what you tell me is that, look, we had Barack Obama for 8 years, and there are a lot of people in the African community who think that's great, but we didn't solve a lot of the problems that our community has.
Yeah, very true, especially out of what I'm hearing from many of our younger voters. We did have eight years of our first black president, but many believe that nothing was truly delivered at a level that would impact them in their everyday lives. So, and many of our younger voters have been, quite verbal about it and quite angry about what they consider to be a missed opportunity for gains for blacks. Coupled with, I think, that happened in the last election, this huge demographic shift that we've been talking about for the last decade or more, where blacks, Hispanics, and other minority populations together will now form a majority here in the United States, and I think that frightened many people.
Because we heard a lot during this campaign that because of the increase in the African American community, Hispanic community, Asian community, that demographics is destiny, and that the Democrats would have a mortal lock on the White House. And you're saying that you believe that just scared the dickens out of white voters.
Yeah. It motivated, especially as we know our rural communities came out in numbers. I think Mr. Trump he was, I think, pretty masterful in getting that population out to vote because they showed up in numbers, and I witnessed it at many of the supervisor election office, the number of folks that I would consider rural community that were showing up to vote.
I would imagine a good number of our more conservative viewers to this broadcast are going to say, good, that the African American community should give the Republican Party a chance. And if they made inroads in this last election, there'll be more inroads in the next election. And Cornell, you are with the Democratic Party. If this, was there, number one, was there something that Hillary Clinton could have done but didn't? And what do you do now?
Well, lots of things she could have done. Lots of, when Rodney talks about the feeling that Barack Obama didn't deliver, I think that's an issue of education. And Hillary could have done a lot more to educate, the electorate on why she was the best candidate. But I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on what Hillary could have done better. Hillary, I think that education and on the issues would solve that issue with our young folks thinking that Barack Obama didn't deliver for them. The issue of the demographics taking over, and a campaign based on fear of a demographic taking over. So what the Democratic Party can do is run a campaign run a message that is based on values that touch the hearts of people, that's not based on fear. Because what we saw was an election that was won based on
Jack, are political scientists everywhere studying this research and trying to figure out where do we go from here, knowing full well in terms of predictions and models, I don't want to blame the political science community or pollsters, but you didn't do so good last time.
We didn't do that well last time. And I think what this election really shows is that old-time politics still matter. Democrats have been making the argument for a decade, if not more now, that demographics is destiny, as you've said. And it's almost like Democrats have taken this as an excuse to not reach out the way they need to. You need to make arguments to voters about what you're going to do for them and what and why they should vote for you.
What you seem to be saying is specific suggestions in terms of what you could do for them, not just an uplifting message. So again, Cornell, and Ronnie, is the community looking for specific ideas, whether it comes to income inequality or criminal justice? What, and I don't want to generalize here, but what is the community looking for?
I think all those things that you just said, every category where African Americans, blacks have been last, whether it's academic attainment, socioeconomics, leading incarceration rates, health disparities, I mean, we are at the bottom. And you get tired of being at the bottom, you get disenchanted for a little while. So, when you talk about Democrat and Republican, that means less and less to certain populations because they all see it the same, regardless who's in. It's been the same. We've been at the bottom. We're suffering, and guess what? We're just going to abandon the system. I think that's probably not the best move because you abandon the system to what? It's like jumping out of a boat and not having another one. So what happened, I believe in this, even though it was that percentage of increase was not good, I think we weakened our position in our political position because everyone knows that whoever gets the most votes and makes the most noise, they get the attention. So I think as it comes to having our needs met and finally being an equal partner in this American society, I don't think that was the best move to steer away from the polls, but I can certainly understand the logic on why they did it because it's the way they feel. And I can say I honestly feel that way too.
We have less than a minute left before the break, but I want to ask you, within the Democratic Party, going up the chain of command all the way from the state to the national party, is there kind of some kind of introspection to figure out how to fix these things and do a better job in messaging?
Oh, lots of it. Yes, absolutely. Because the messaging has to be, within our own party. We've got to understand what will draw people out. Who do we have to have on ballots to excite the folks in the neighborhood? I've got to have someone who looks like me if you want to get me out to vote. Okay. So
let's take a quick break, and when we return, we will have final thoughts from our guests, plus what some of our viewers are saying about last night's topic, an MTV reality show on Siesta Key. Welcome back. What could be done to get African American voters to the polls, and how could increasing the turnout impact national, state, and local elections? Our guests join us right now for final thoughts. And Jack, that brings up another issue that we're not just dealing about presidential elections. We're talking about state elections and local elections and the impact that lower numbers have on that. Is that something that the political science community is looking at?
Yeah, the story with all state and local elections is that they get lower turnout overall than national elections, and they get disproportionately lower turnout among African Americans, among young people, and among people that are not Republicans, essentially.
Quick question. We're going to be going into a midterm here where the president is having a lot of problems. There is an overall attitude about what's happening. Do you see any reversals in the trends that Democrats don't do as well in midterms as Republicans usually?
It's not usually Democrats not doing all that well in midterms. That's been the story recently. It's usually the party that's not in power that does well in midterms. So I think Democrats can expect a pretty good 2018, although the map is pretty bad in the Senate for them.
Right, but locally, Cornell, if you have that window of opportunity and you're involved both in terms of the African American community and the Democratic Party, what are you doing now to gear up for that and to get people to the polls who took a flyer last time?
Oh, lots of talking, lots of mailing, lots of calling. I tell you, it is exhilarating to take ownership and responsibility for your quality of life, and so that's the message that we work to impart. And Keenan Wooten in the opening segment talked about the importance of the local elections, and the Black Caucus locally here works really hard with that message, how important it is to get the local election.
Rodney, talk to area Republicans and Democrats here who have been watching what's been happening in the news, and some like what they're seeing from this new president and new administration, and then you have Democrats, at least on the national election, trying to tell people in all communities, see, we told you so.
Yeah. Well, if people enjoy presidency of scandal. This is it, because it's been riddled with it and haven't really haven't been able to focus on the true issues of the country due to all the scandal. But for me, Democrat or Republican, I'm interested in results. Black people, African Americans, we've suffered in this country. We haven't been equal partners for a long time. The data proves it across a wide array, across every genre, and we need something different. So, Democrat or Republican, I'm interested in who's going to produce.
All right, well, we'll have to leave it there. But before we go, we want to share with you what some of our viewers are saying about last night's topic, MTV's upcoming reality show, Siesta Key. The show is set on the Suncoast Barrier Island and follows a group of elite college students returning home for the summer. While those close to the project say it won't focus on partying or a spring break atmosphere, some worry that it will still misrepresent the community. And here's what some of you are saying. Zanny Arrayas writes, Siesta already has more than enough publicity, plus Sarasota has always been the type of place that you can take your kids to the beach at sunset. We do not need Siesta turning into a party beach where a bunch of drunk people are causing a ruckus. Jake Perlman writes, I'm not a fan of the concept, everybody's laughing, but I welcome it because it will encourage more big film projects to happen. And Becky Wells writes, I know someone whose son is one of the cast members. I just hope the whole thing does not embarrass SRQ. I sure miss our small, quiet little town. Well, what do you think about voter turnout, particularly in the African American community? Join the conversation by visiting our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. And FYI, you can watch past discussions on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. Thanks to our guests for being here tonight. Rodney Jones is the president of the Manatee County NAACP. Cornell Maxfield is president of the Manatee-Sarasota Democratic Black Caucus. And Jack Riley is an assistant professor of political science at New College of Florida.